Okay, looks like we're at 11 o'clock, so I will get started and hopefully folks can hear me. It looks like we have a few folks in the session. Welcome to this session, the Reoccupancy Hierarchy of Needs. I'm Scott Sibman, Executive Vice President for Building Engines. It's my pleasure to be here this morning, have this opportunity to participate in the event with CREtech and to share some insights that hopefully folks will find valuable and helpful. I'm actually going to save you any further suffering of having to look at me and my screen, and we'll share a deck as I take you through some of those ideas in the time we have this morning, and look forward to any chats that may come in and the opportunity again to help folks. So let's see if I can do this correctly. Share my screen, and you should be looking at my deck. A few slides here momentarily. And as we don't have a great feedback loop on this, I'm going to assume that that's working and you're looking at the opening to the presentation for this morning. I want to start with a little statistic. In 2018, in CBRE's America's Occupier Survey, 81% of corporate occupiers perceived amenities as integral to the employee experience and encouraged landlords and other service providers to enhance these offerings. So I guess the takeaway there is what a difference a couple of years and a pandemic makes. And that's the context for what we want to talk about this morning. We have a short time, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible as we touch on the areas you see here and look at them through the lens of not only where we are and what we know today, but with a clear understanding that we're all really planning out weeks at a time. We talk about this internally in our company and our organization of Building Engines, and I'm fairly certain the same is true for most real estate landlords and management companies as well. We're all using the best information we have at the time, knowing full well that it's going to change. And I think perhaps the best guidance I can offer is right here at the beginning, and suggest that flexibility and agility are perhaps the most important personal and organizational attributes we'll need together over the next 6 months to a year. The only thing we know for certain is that things will change. We just don't know how. So with that, let's jump in and talk a little bit about some specifics. This, to get started, this should look familiar, right? This is where we were just realistically a short time ago, but it probably feels like a long time ago at this point. This is where the focus was for, in particularly the commercial real estate, the multi-tenant office building. This is what landlords, management companies, technology companies were thinking about. In addition to these items here, gyms, coffee shops, new lobbies, landlords were thinking about things like offering yoga classes, building community rooms, rooftop decks, bike storage rooms, etc. All of these done and offered at a breakneck pace, and all of them designed to attract and retain tenants. It was pretty clear about what was going on at the time. And in addition to the CBRE report I mentioned and referenced, we conducted at Building Engines a lot of our own research. And we had in 2019, we published something called the Tenant Experience Gap Report. And in that report, it showed that with the organizations we surveyed, over 60% of them plan to increase spending in all of these areas over the next couple of years. There was so much attention here paid to this area that it was often referred to as the amenities arm race, right? And it spurred a whole category of technology solutions designed to help manage it. Now, I haven't heard anyone say that these things won't still be important, but the priorities, the priorities for what matters to tenants now has clearly shifted. And this is what it looks like today, right? We've been forced, all of us, landlords, technology providers, management companies, into a pretty dramatic pivot. In the plans to support tenants moving back into the office or coming back into the office, these are broadly the areas that have been front and center in most people's minds and plans, at least from what we're seeing and what we're reading and talking with customers about. Now, for each of these, process, enablement, tracking, reporting, and technology have all been redirected and focused here. Quick story, one of the members of my team ventured into our New York office for the first time last week. Felt it was time and important that, she wanted to get back and get to work. And I asked her how it felt. And her response to me was centered on the things that related to entering the building, process for things like she had to take a temperature check, the signage, the lack of congestion, all of those things contributed to making her feel safe and comfortable. But my question, what I was really thinking about and inquiring about, was how it felt being in the office and working with other colleagues, the few other colleagues that were there, and the impact on productivity and work, and all those things were secondary. The first thing that she focused on was how she felt and whether she felt safe, comfortable, and secure coming back into the space. So it's clear to see why these things are important and how much has changed. But when you think about it, when you look at it, has much really changed? And this is something we published and wrote about over a year and a half ago. And it related to what I talked about at the very beginning in terms of the amenities arms race and the focus and the attention on all of these things designed to attract and retain tenants. And the reason we put this together is it's certainly related directly to what Building Engines does and the things that we support and enable with our customers through our platform, through Building Engines and our new product called Prism. But the premise here and what we were trying to emphasize is that you have to do certain things right first. We're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs from Psych 101. Well, this was our take on applying those principles to what occupants of buildings actually need, right? And it always starts at the foundation. And the premise here was that unless you had the foundation right, the areas of operational excellence in terms of infrastructure, process, management, to deliver on these foundational must-haves, which are safety, comfort, service, right? And that equates to the Maslow hierarchy of shelter and safety and security as well. Your tenants wouldn't be able to appreciate the other things that were being offered and the nice to have amenities and perks. Ownership and management wouldn't be able to fully realize the benefit of their investment in those areas unless they did these things well and had the tools and systems in place to make sure that they were operating well. Well, there's no question that for a portion of the market, the focus on amenities and all the things at the top had a meaningful impact, but it feels like that we're now back to basics in some sense. More than ever, it's important for CRE operators to have processes and systems in place to ensure that they're equipped to open and operate safe and healthy buildings and manage the new operating processes that are being put in place in order to enable the reoccupancy of buildings. That is crystal clear. And while many owners do have those in place, it's important that they have true operating platforms in every area of their business in order to help their property teams deal with all of the new requirements. So we'll talk a little bit more about that specifically in terms of what that means going forward. And if you drill down into these, they've always been there, right? They've always been there, but the context has changed dramatically. Much like my team member who felt that was the important part of her ability to go back into the building and go back into an office. This is what's important to make sure that people are ready and comfortable to come back. Landlords and management teams are applying tremendous amount of resources and energy into these areas and making sure that these fundamental items with a focus on safety, cleanliness, and communications are as good as they possibly can be. They're being implemented for every phase of building operations. But the downstream implications of all of these changes are significant. And I don't think that I hear enough people talking about them. And that's pretty interesting. The same management teams are in place, right? It's the same people in the building. Perhaps even in some cases, they're more lean, right? There's been restructuring of teams in buildings, perhaps less people, more reliance on outside contractors. We've seen that in certain Martin segments. But there's certainly more in terms of process, policies, and procedures that are being directed at those people in the buildings. So they have more to do, which is ironic. Fewer people in the building, but more that they're responsible for, certainly leading up to reoccupancy, but as they move forward and people start making their way back into buildings. And additionally, with the unknowns of potential future liability hanging out there, the requirements to carefully track and document compliance with all of these things, all of the policies and processes, procedures being put in place is essential. So the need for systems is greater than ever. Some of the specifics, some of the things that are being put in place are evidence here. And interestingly, in my role at Building Engines, where I'm focused on today mergers and acquisitions, building out a new partner program for our new Prism operating platform, I've had a unique opportunity over the past 6 months to listen closely to both customers, speak with many technology solution providers out there as they've both prepared to help manage these critical areas. And again, while they're not new, they have a greater level of importance, and they have some new requirements on teams and the systems that support them. So some of the specific examples include things like building-wide communication. Again, there's been tools in place. We've supported that. Other providers have supported that as well. But what's different today is that communication doesn't necessarily apply to people in the building. It's applying to people working at home, people in sort of a hybrid model as we're moving towards, where they're working from home and will be spending time in the office. And we're also including things like changing information coming from different sources. So we're now keeping people informed with things like closures, cleanings, critical updates, and staying in touch and keeping people up to date on all of those areas is critical. We're getting new information regularly coming out of the CDC, out of the World Health Organization, local jurisdictions. What I've been hearing from our customers is that they monitor these things every day. Some of them communicate those updates every single day to their tenants, and they communicate what those changes or what the new guidance means for new changes in policies and procedures in their building. The only way they can effectively do that is with a communication tool that enables that. So things like broadcast messaging, emergency communications, we offer those capabilities. There's some standalone capabilities as well, but the ability to do that simply, easily, include additional information, attach documents, and so forth is critical to the reoccupancy effort, and that's what customers are relying on today. So you have to be certain you're getting the information out regularly. You have to be certain it's getting to the right people, and that those people, if they're primary points of contact in an organization, can disseminate it to the people on their teams that may be working in from home, maybe planning to come into the office, and what the implications are for all of those folks. Some of the other things include new procedures and protocols. Probably the one thing that most people have been talked about is updated cleaning frequencies, right? Both for common areas and for tenant spaces. And in addition to that, it requires coordination with contractors, with your janitorial companies, to make sure that staffing levels are correct, but also that workflows are managed as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Other areas include inspections. So compliance and documentation, and thinking about things like unoccupied space, right? Most of our customers are telling us today that 10 to 20% of their buildings are occupied. And it varies by region, certainly with different guidance in different states. But unoccupied space creates a whole set of new challenges and protocols that have to be followed. Sometimes unoccupied space is even more at risk than space that's occupied for things like water leaks, for example, and things that aren't being monitored. So do you use people or technology for those things? And those are the things that customers are wrestling with today. It's like, how do we do this with the staffing levels we have and with the new requirements that are in place? So they have to think carefully about that. Other procedures and protocols include what I referenced earlier in our building in New York, where we're a tenant, and they are taking temperature tests of people, temperature checks of people occupying and coming into the building. And the question that we hear constantly everybody wrestling with, the two questions are we allowed to? And I think clearly the answer is yes. But should we? And if you do that, and if you decide that you're going to take temperature checks, how are you capturing information? What are your protocols and procedures for the follow-up and the result of a positive test or a positive temperature check? How are you coordinating and communicating that information with your tenants in the building? All of those decisions require systems, processes, and then systems to help manage it, and then document what you've done and the actions you've taken. And if you don't do those correctly, then you're certainly setting yourself up for potential issues down the road. Another thing that we're hearing a lot about today is the importance of air quality tests and HVAC maintenance. Research, recent things that we've been reading a lot about seems to indicate that air quality and HVAC maintenance, HVAC system maintenance, is perhaps the single most important area for both managing the potential spread of the virus, as well as making tenants feel truly comfortable about coming back into the office. Even internally in our organization, this is the one thing that seems to be coming out more often, is how do we know the air quality and the air safety is where it should be? The implication of this, and perhaps the side benefit most relevant to the primary topic of this conference, is that there is an impact with regard to cost savings for HVAC maintenance, as well as energy efficiency. So as we've been talking with customers and some of our partners on the energy front, a company like Hatch Data, which is one of our partners, they've been monitoring this very closely and carefully from an energy consumption perspective in terms of how systems are performing. But in terms of the reoccupancy effort, it's important that management teams and landlords are thinking about, and we hear they are thinking about this, how they can show their tenants and their occupants that they're managing HVAC equipment carefully, they're changing filters regularly, and that they have the ability, if it's requested, to manage air quality. And again, there's solutions and providers out there that help you do that, but it's clearly an area of renewed focus today. So in closing, there's additional considerations for all of these things that our customers have shared with us. There's an impact on budgets, certainly, for all of these items. And there's an impact on workflow. It's easy to create a process. And I think this is the downstream effect of everything that we're seeing. The hard work is thinking through how you enable that process and how you enable the workflows for those processes and their impact on staffing and costs. A quick example of that is a tenant expense for their suite, for cleaning a suite, or a meeting that takes place. And if the process in place and the agreement with occupants is that when a meeting is completed, a tenant will indicate to the management team and to the cleaning service that they need that meeting room disinfected and cleaned, then you have to have a system that enables that. You have to be able to capture that information, that event, that trigger, deliver the information to the vendor, the service provider, the janitorial company in place. That janitorial service provider needs to have the staffing in place to be able to react quickly and get up there and provide the service. And then there are decisions made around, typically that might be a billable service. Is that something that the landlord might absorb today to help tenants feel more comfortable moving forward? These are the things we're hearing our customers wrestle with, and that they're trying to figure out as they move forward. So that's just one example of one process, one procedure that both needs to be enabled and thought through in terms of the implications on things like staffing and budgets and process, and perhaps change in what we used to do and how it used to be managed going forward. So it's important to think about, because if it's not done well, if it's not thought through well, there's certainly a potential increase for tenant dissatisfaction, for not enabling or encouraging more tenants to reoccupy, or more occupants within a tenant space to get back to the office, and that's certainly something people want and is important as well. I think perhaps the last point I'll make is that the silver lining to all of this, perhaps, and it's hard to find one, but is that CRE has been talking about the coming digital transformation for years now. And while this certainly isn't the way it was planned or what anyone wanted, there's some evidence, and we're starting to see this, and we're hearing about it, that the pace of digital transformation may actually increase because of the need for technology solutions to help manage all of what's required to enable the reoccupancy. And the fact that people have time to actually think through these things now, which is an interesting dynamic as well. So as they're thinking through what they have to do, they're also thinking about what they need. And we could see an acceleration of that, of the digital transformation going forward. So that's really all that I had time to cover today and wanted to cover. Again, it was a pretty high level discussion, but hopefully there were some nuggets you could take away that will be helpful. It was a pleasure to have this opportunity to share these thoughts with you today. Here's my contact information. You can reach me by email, and certainly find me on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Please feel free to reach out if you'd like to connect to talk about this or any other subject that might be interesting. I always enjoy talking with both the industry, the landlords, management companies, as well as tech providers out there. Hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Have a great day. Thank you for your time.